My name is Sophie Taylor, and I'm 26 years old. On paper, I'm a top-performing sales representative at a well-known trade company. I'm proud of what I've accomplished, but if you'd met me a few years ago, you wouldn't believe I'd get here. Heck, I wouldn't have believed it either. My life wasn't some steady upward climb toward success. It was more like a series of bruising tumbles, scraped knees, and hard lessons. But I'm here now, standing tall, and let me tell you, that didn't come easy. I work in the sales division, a fast-paced world where your worth is measured by numbers on a spreadsheet. Fortunately for me, I've got the numbers. Month after month, my sales proposals get approved, my clients stay loyal, and I outperform everyone else. They call me the ace of the sales division, and as much as I'm flattered, I also feel the weight of that nickname. It's like living in a fishbowl. Everyone's watching, waiting to see if you'll slip up. And believe me, I've slipped more times than I can count. But the thing about me? I don't stay down. If I'm being honest, my journey into this career wasn't exactly planned. Some people graduate with a shiny degree, a carefully crafted resume, and a grand vision for their future. That wasn't me. When I finished high school, I wasn't headed for college. I was just headed out. Out of my parents' house, out of the shadow of my older brother Lucas, out of a world where I constantly felt like I didn't measure up. Lucas is brilliant. Let's start there. Growing up, he was the golden child, the one who scored a perfect SAT, got into a top-tier university, and landed a corner office at his own company by 30. Meanwhile, I was the kid who barely scraped by in school. I wasn't lazy. I studied harder than anyone I knew. I had tutors. I stayed up late. But no matter what I did, I was never him. Every A- on my report card felt like a failure because, next to Lucas's A+, it might as well have been an F. I remember one night vividly. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an SAT practice test with tears streaming down my face. My parents were in the next room, gushing about Lucas's latest achievement. "He's so gifted," Mom said. "He's going to change the world," Dad added. I wanted to scream, "What about me?" But I didn't. I just clenched my fists, wiped my tears, and kept going. That was me back then, quiet, determined, and completely invisible. After graduation, I decided I'd had enough. If school wasn't my path to success, I'd find another way. So, while Lucas went off to his ivy-covered university, I walked into the nearest job fair and applied for anything that didn't require a college degree. That's how I ended up at Taylor & Company, the trade company where I still work today. Let me tell you, those early days were rough. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know the difference between a product catalog and an invoice. I couldn't even explain what my company actually sold. More than once, I stumbled through client meetings, fumbling my words and watching their eyes glaze over. I wasn't just out of my depth, I was drowning. But then, something happened that changed everything. One day, I was meeting with a client who had come in to order a specific product. It wasn't the best fit for their needs, and I knew it. On a whim, I suggested something else, a product I'd recently learned about that I thought might suit them better. I braced myself for rejection, but to my surprise, they smiled and said, "You know what? That's perfect." Seeing their face light up, knowing I'd helped them find exactly what they needed, was a revelation. For the first time, I realized that selling wasn't just about numbers or quotas, it was about people. That moment ignited something in me. I wanted to get better, not just for myself, but for my clients. I started studying our product catalog like it was a sacred text. I learned every feature, every benefit, every tiny detail. I practiced my pitch in the mirror until I could do it in my sleep. Slowly but surely, I turned things around. Clients started trusting me, and my numbers reflected that trust. But success has a way of attracting attention, and not all of it is good. While many of my colleagues were supportive, there were always whispers behind my back. Jealous murmurs about how I must be lucky, or how I was just using my looks. I ignored it for the most part, focusing on what mattered, my work. But when Mia Carter joined the company, those whispers turned into something much louder. The day Mia Carter walked into the office, I had a strange feeling in my gut. You know the kind, that subtle, nagging sensation that something is off. At the time, I brushed it off as nothing more than nerves. I mean, I had no reason to worry about her. She was just another new hire. I'd been in the company for years, had an excellent track record, and was known as one of the best. Why would Mia Carter be any different from the countless other colleagues I'd worked with? The answer came faster than I expected. I still remember the moment we were introduced. Our manager, Mr. Harper, called me into his office and said, "Sophie, this is Mia Carter. She'll be joining the sales division, and I'd like you to train her." He smiled like it was a great honor, but I could already see the unease in Mia's eyes. She barely looked at me as we shook hands. When she did, it was as though she was sizing me up, like I was some obstacle she needed to overcome. "Nice to meet you," I said warmly, extending a hand. "I'm Sophie Taylor. I'll be handling your training, so if you have any questions." "Are you sure this is okay?" she interrupted, cutting me off. Her voice was sharp, her tone skeptical. "I just want to make sure I'm being trained by someone competent." Competent. That word hung in the air like a slap. My smile faltered, but I caught myself. "I assure you, Mia, you're in good hands." She didn't look convinced. "I guess we'll see." From that moment, I knew training Mia was going to be a challenge. What I didn't realize was just how deep her arrogance ran. During our first week, I tried my best to be patient. I walked her through the basics of our sales system, showed her how to customize proposals, and even shared some of my personal tips for connecting with clients. But instead of listening, Mia questioned everything I said. "Why are you wasting time with handwritten thank you notes?" she asked one afternoon as I demonstrated the practice. "No one reads those anymore. It's inefficient." "It may seem inefficient," I explained calmly, "but it's also effective. Clients appreciate the personal touch. It shows we care." She snorted. "I don't think so. If the product is good, that's all that matters." I wanted to argue, but I reminded myself to stay professional. Not all clients are the same. A thoughtful gesture can go a long way. "Sure," she said, smirking. "If you like being a suck-up." By the end of her first month, I was emotionally drained. Mia's condescension wasn't limited to our training sessions. It spilled over into the rest of the office. She questioned my decisions in front of colleagues, mocked my meticulous approach to product knowledge, and even spread rumors about me. One day, I overheard her whispering to someone near the coffee machine, "Sophie's not as great as everyone thinks. She just bats her eyelashes and plays the sweetheart act to get sales." I froze. For a moment, I felt the sting of her words, but I quickly reminded myself that rumors only have power if you let them. So I brushed it off and continued to focus on my work. Still, I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. The turning point came during a company meeting where monthly sales results were announced. As usual, I was the top performer, and my colleagues clapped and congratulated me. Everyone, that is, except Mia. I saw her in the back of the room, glaring at me with such intensity it made my skin crawl. She bit her lip, her face twisted in frustration, and I knew right then and there, this wasn't just jealousy. This was war. From that day on, Mia's behavior escalated. She stopped even pretending to respect me. If I tried to correct her mistakes, she'd roll her eyes and say, "Thanks, Mom." If I shared advice, she'd laugh and call me a nerd. And when I finally completed her training period, I thought I was free of her, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Mia didn't leave me alone after training. If anything, she became more brazen. Little things started to go missing from my desk: pens, sticky notes, even my stapler. At first, I chalked it up to forgetfulness or coincidence. But when my schedules on the company's shared app started disappearing and important documents went missing, I realized it wasn't a coincidence at all. It was sabotage. I tried confronting her once. "Mia, I don't know what your problem is, but this has to stop." She smirked, leaning back in her chair. "Problem? I don't have a problem, Sophie. Maybe you're just paranoid." "Don't play games with me," I snapped. "I know you're behind this." "Do you have proof?" she asked, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "Because if you don't, I'd suggest you stop accusing people. It's unprofessional." Her words hit a nerve, but I forced myself to stay calm. I walked away that day feeling helpless and frustrated. I'd dealt with difficult colleagues before, but Mia was something else entirely. It wasn't just her arrogance or her sabotage, it was the sheer malice behind her actions. She wasn't just trying to outshine me, she was trying to destroy me. At this point, I knew I was dealing with someone who wouldn't stop until I fought back. But I also knew I had to pick my battles carefully. For now, I would focus on my work and try to stay one step ahead of her. Little did I know, Mia was already planning her next move, and it was about to take things to a whole new level. I wish I could say things got better after Mia finished her training period, but they didn't. If anything, they got worse. Much worse. The little pranks she'd pulled during training, the snide remarks, the misplaced pens, the constant undermining were nothing compared to what was coming. At first, I told myself to stay professional. Keep your head down, Sophie, I thought. Don't give her the satisfaction. But Mia? She wasn't just looking for satisfaction. She wanted a complete and total victory. The first real sign of trouble came when my schedules on the company app started disappearing. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Technology isn't perfect, right? But then it happened again. And again. Meetings I'd carefully planned vanished without a trace. Clients started calling, asking why I hadn't shown up, and I was left scrambling to explain. I'd spend hours recreating schedules only for them to disappear the next day. Then there were the missing documents. I'd save important proposals in the shared folder, only to find them mysteriously gone when I went to retrieve them. Once, I spent an entire weekend drafting a custom product guide for a new client. When Monday rolled around, it was nowhere to be found. I checked every folder, every backup, but it was as if the document had never existed. The client was furious when I couldn't deliver on time, and I was left red-faced and apologizing. I still remember the moment I realized Mia was behind it all. It was a phone call with a longtime client, one of my best accounts. The line suddenly went dead mid-conversation. Panicked, I looked around the office, wondering if there was a technical issue. That's when I saw her. Mia, sitting at her desk with a smug grin, holding the phone cord she'd just unplugged. She didn't even try to hide it. She just sat there, smiling, daring me to do something about it. I marched over to her desk, my heart pounding. "What is wrong with you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger. Mia leaned back in her chair, twirling the phone cord around her finger. "What are you talking about, Sophie?" she asked innocently. "I don't know what you mean." "I saw you unplug the phone," I snapped. "You're sabotaging my work." "Do you have proof?" she said, raising an eyebrow. "Because without proof, you've got nothing." That was the moment I realized just how calculated she was. Mia didn't just sabotage me, she did it in a way that made it almost impossible to prove. Missing schedules? Could be a technical glitch. Vanished documents? Maybe I forgot to save them. Dropped calls? Faulty phone lines. Every little thing she did could be explained away, leaving me with no concrete evidence. And she knew it. Still, I wasn't about to let her get away with stealing from me. One afternoon, I caught her rummaging through my bag. Before I could say a word, she pulled out my wallet, took out 5 $20 bills, and tossed it back to me. "Thanks for the bonus," she said with a smirk. "Keep this up, and I might just let you accuse me all you want." I was speechless. Who does something like that? I went straight to Mr. Harper, hoping he'd finally step in. But without proof, his hands were tied. "I'll talk to her," he said, "but there's not much I can do unless you can provide evidence." The talk did little more than make Mia resent me even more. If anything, it seemed to embolden her. Her harassment escalated to the point where it felt like she was everywhere at once, finding new ways to make my life miserable. Calls with clients were mysteriously cut off, mail and faxes addressed to me ended up in the shredder, and even my personal notes went missing from my desk. I tried to adapt. I asked clients to email me instead of calling. I checked the shredder bin multiple times a day to rescue important documents. I saved backup copies of every file on my personal drive. But all of this came at a cost. My overtime hours doubled and my stress levels skyrocketed. I'd go home exhausted, dreading what fresh nightmare Mia would cook up the next day. It wasn't just the sabotage that got to me, it was the sheer malice behind it. Mia wasn't just trying to make me look bad, she wanted to break me. And some days, it felt like she might succeed. I'd catch myself questioning everything, my abilities, my resilience, even my sanity. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let her win. I'd worked too hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't about to let someone like Mia take that away from me. So, I started documenting everything. Every missing file, every dropped call, every time she crossed the line. I didn't know how or when, but I was determined to fight back. What I didn't realize was that Mia was already planning her next move, a move that would take her harassment to an entirely new level and push me to the brink. After months of Mia's harassment, I was running on sheer willpower. Every day felt like a battle just to get through my workload, but then something incredible happened, a ray of light in what had become a very dark tunnel. It started with a simple inquiry from one of the biggest names in the medical device industry, a corporation that held the top market share in its field. When I saw the email in my inbox, my heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any client. This was the type of account that could define a career. If we could land this deal, it would mean millions in revenue for the company and a promotion for me. I had worked with high-profile clients before, but nothing on this scale. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was the opportunity. When Mr. Harper called me into his office to confirm I'd be the main contact for the client, I could barely contain my excitement. "Sophie," he said with a smile, "this is your chance to shine. You've earned this." For a moment, I allowed myself to feel the pride I'd been pushing down for months. Finally, my hard work was paying off. Of course, this was a high-stakes account, so I wasn't going to handle it alone. Mr. Harper asked me to select someone to assist me. My first thought was to choose a colleague I trusted, someone reliable and supportive. But before I could even open my mouth, Mia spoke up. "I'd love to assist Sophie on this project," she said, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "I think my experience would be a great asset." I froze. I wanted to say no, to explain why Mia was the last person I wanted or needed on this project. But before I could object, Mr. Harper nodded. "That's a great idea," he said. "You two will make a strong team." I wanted to scream. Instead, I forced a tight smile and said, "Of course. Happy to have Mia on board." Inside, I was fuming. I knew exactly what she was up to. This wasn't about teamwork or contributing to the project. This was about sabotaging me on the biggest deal of my career. And as I feared, it didn't take long for her to strike. The first sign of trouble came a few days later. A close colleague pulled me aside and whispered, "Sophie, did you approve these materials?" She held up a brochure for a product I hadn't even considered recommending to the client. My stomach dropped. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. The product was decent, but it didn't match the client's needs at all. It was like offering someone a chocolate cake when they specifically asked for an apple pie. Close, but not the right fit. "Mia sent these over to the client yesterday," my colleague said, her voice low. "I thought you should know." I felt a wave of panic and anger. Mia had gone behind my back, promoting a product that could jeopardize the entire deal. But instead of confronting her, I decided to act quickly and quietly. I called the client's contact and casually brought up the materials they'd received. "I just wanted to make sure you got everything you needed," I said. "If you have any questions, I'd be happy to clarify." The contact laughed. "Thanks, Sophie." We were a bit confused about some of the materials, but we assumed it was just a mix-up. I breathed a sigh of relief. "I'm so sorry about that," I said. "Let me send you some additional information that might be more relevant to your needs." That phone call saved the deal. Over the next week, I worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with the client. I listened carefully to their concerns, asked thoughtful questions, and recommended products that aligned perfectly with their goals. By the time we had our first in-person meeting, the client was not only satisfied but impressed. Mia, on the other hand, continued to meddle. She interrupted me during meetings, contradicted my recommendations, and even tried to take credit for my ideas. But no matter what she did, I stayed focused. This deal was too important to let her derail me. Finally, after weeks of back-and-forth discussions, the client made their decision. I'll never forget the moment I got the call. Sophie, the contact said, "We've decided to go with one of the products you recommended. It's exactly what we need." When I hung up, I couldn't stop smiling. The deal was worth $5 million, the biggest of my career. I sent the quote to the client immediately, carefully outlining the terms we'd discussed. When Mia saw the quote, her reaction was almost comical. Her eyes widened, and she grabbed the paper from my desk. "Wow," she said, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. "That's a huge deal. I guess they went with the product I sent them, right?" I couldn't help but smirk. "Actually, no," I said. "They chose one of the products I recommended." Her smile froze. "Oh, well, I guess they just liked your pitch better," she muttered, trying to hide her disappointment. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought Mia would finally realize she couldn't win by sabotaging me. But I was wrong. The day of the client meeting was fast approaching, and Mia wasn't done. Not by a long shot. The day of the client meeting finally arrived, and I was equal parts nervous and excited. This wasn't just another meeting, it was the meeting. A $5 million deal hung in the balance, and all I had to do was close it. My presentation was polished, my talking points memorized, and my confidence high. For once, I wasn't going to let Mia or her antics distract me. At least, that's what I told myself. The plan was simple. Mia and I would meet directly at the airport, where she'd have our tickets ready. We'd board the flight together, attend the meeting, and secure the deal. Easy, right? But if I've learned anything about Mia, it's that nothing with her is ever easy. I arrived at the airport an hour before the flight as planned. I scanned the crowded terminal, searching for her familiar face. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. I started to feel that gnawing sense of unease in the pit of my stomach. I called her, but the phone rang endlessly before going to voicemail. Where was she? Panic began to set in. I approached the airline counter, hoping they could help. "Hi, I'm Sophie Taylor," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm supposed to be on the 9 a.m. flight. My colleague has the tickets, but I can't seem to reach her. Is there any chance you could check my reservation?" The attendant's polite smile faltered as she typed on her keyboard. After a moment, she looked up at me, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's no reservation under your name for this flight." I blinked. There must be some mistake. My colleague, Mia Carter, was supposed to handle the booking. The attendant checked again, shaking her head. "There's a reservation for Miss Carter, but nothing for you." For a moment, I just stood there, stunned. My hands gripped the edge of the counter as realization dawned. Mia hadn't booked my ticket. She'd left me stranded. I tried calling her again, and this time, she answered. "Oh, Sophie," she said, her tone so casual it made my blood boil. "Sorry I didn't pick up earlier. I was busy boarding the flight." "Boarding the flight?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Mia, why didn't you book my ticket?" There was a brief pause before she responded, her voice dripping with mock innocence. "Oh, didn't I? Must have slipped my mind. But don't worry, I'll handle the meeting. After all, it's a $5 million deal today. Do you think I should carry the trash?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could hear her laughing on the other end of the line, enjoying my frustration. Before I could say another word, the line went dead and her phone was switched off. She'd planned this from the start. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at my phone in disbelief. My mind raced with 100 different emotions: anger, betrayal, panic. But then, something shifted. I wasn't going to let Mia win. Not this time. I took a deep breath and dialed the one person I knew could help, my brother, Lucas. Lucas wasn't just my brother, he was the CEO of the client company we were meeting that day. I'd avoided relying on him in the past, determined to succeed on my own, but desperate times called for desperate measures. "Lucas, it's Sophie," I said when he picked up. "We need to talk." Over the next few minutes, I explained everything: Mia's sabotage, her deliberate attempts to undermine me, and now, her latest betrayal. To my relief, Lucas didn't hesitate. "Don't worry," he said firmly. "We'll handle this." While I waited for the next available flight, Lucas worked behind the scenes. He called our company's CEO, Mr. Harper, and the manager of my department to inform them of what had happened. Together, they came up with a plan to confront Mia at the meeting. Unfortunately, the next flight was fully booked, leaving me stranded at the airport. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness creeping in. I'd worked so hard to secure this deal, and now, thanks to Mia, I was stuck on the sidelines. But then, just after 1 p.m., my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Mia. Suppressing a bitter laugh, I answered. "Hello? Where are you?" she hissed, her voice frantic. "The client CEO says if you're not here, the deal is off." Her panic was almost satisfying. "I'm at the airport," I said calmly. "Where you left me." There was a long pause, followed by a string of excuses and apologies, but I barely listened. In the background, I could hear Lucas's voice, firm and commanding. He must have instructed Mia to switch to a video call because moments later, my phone buzzed again with a video invitation. When I accepted, I was greeted by Mia's pale, panicked face on one side of the screen and Lucas's calm, composed expression on the other. The manager and Mr. Harper were also present, their expressions grim. Mia's eyes widened as she saw me on the call. "Wait, what's going on?" Lucas didn't miss a beat. "Mia," he said coldly, "calling my sister trash is not only disrespectful, it's unforgivable." Her face went from pale to beet red. I didn't mean." "Enough," Lucas interrupted. "We've heard enough. Sophie, you've done your job well, and this company values you. We'll discuss this further when you return." Mia stammered, but it was clear her game was up. As I ended the call, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. For the first time in months, the tables had turned. When I finally made it back to the office the next day, the air felt thick with tension. Mia's betrayal had ignited a firestorm, not just with me, but with the entire management team. While I wasn't physically present at the meeting, Lucas, my brother, and the client company CEO had ensured Mia faced the consequences of her actions. Now, it was time to lay everything out on the table. Mia was already at her desk when I arrived, looking smug as ever. She probably thought she'd pulled off some great victory by going to the meeting without me. Little did she know, I wasn't about to let her walk away unscathed. "Morning, Sophie," she said, her tone sickly sweet. "Sorry about the mix-up yesterday. Hope it wasn't too inconvenient for you." I didn't dignify her comment with a response. Instead, I set my bag down, pulled out my phone, and walked straight into Mr. Harper's office. The CEO, Mr. Daniels, and my department manager, Mr. Reed, were already waiting for me, their expressions serious. "Good morning, Sophie," Mr. Daniels said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We've reviewed the situation, and we'd like to hear your side of the story." I nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. "Thank you for giving me the chance to explain," I began. "First, I'd like to clarify that I never approved Mia's actions regarding the meeting. In fact, she intentionally left me stranded at the airport, knowing full well that I was supposed to be there." Mr. Harper frowned. "Do you have evidence of this?" "Yes," I replied, pulling out my phone. I recorded our conversation when I realized something wasn't right. I played the audio file, letting Mia's voice fill the room. Her words, dismissive, mocking, and cruel, played back loud and clear. "Today's a $5 million deal," she had said. "Do you think I should carry the trash along?" Mr. Daniels's face darkened as he listened. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. But I wasn't done. I showed them emails and timestamps proving that Mia had deliberately deleted my schedule and altered client communication records. "She's been sabotaging my work for months," I explained. "Missing documents, dropped calls, shredded mail. It's all been part of her plan to undermine me." Mr. Reed leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "This is worse than I thought," he said. "Why didn't you bring this to us sooner?" "I tried," I said honestly. But without concrete proof, it felt like I was shouting into the void. Mia was careful to cover her tracks, and until now, I didn't have enough evidence to connect the dots. "Until now," Mr. Daniels repeated, his tone resolute. "Well, Sophie, you've made your case. Now it's our turn to act. Just as he finished speaking, there was a knock at the door. It was Mia, looking as confident as ever. "You wanted to see me, sir?" she asked, her voice all sugar and innocence. "Yes, Mia," Mr. Daniels said coolly. "Take a seat." She sat down, glancing at me with a smirk. She probably thought this meeting was about to go in her favor. That confidence didn't last long. "Mia," Mr. Daniels began, "we've reviewed the events of yesterday, as well as the accusations Sophie has made regarding your behavior. The evidence she's provided is both damning and undeniable." Mia's smile faltered. I don't know what she's talking about," she stammered. "This is all a misunderstanding." "Is it?" Mr. Reed interjected, his voice sharp. "Because we've heard the recordings. We've seen the emails. And we've already spoken to the client's CEO. Do you have anything to say for yourself?" Mia's face turned red. This is a setup," she exclaimed. "Sophie's trying to make me look bad because she's jealous of my skills." I raised an eyebrow. "Jealous? Of what, exactly?" "Your ability to sabotage your own career." Mia glared at me, but before she could respond, Mr. Daniels held up a hand. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Mia, your actions have not only jeopardized this deal, but have also undermined the trust and integrity of this company. Effective immediately, you are suspended pending a full investigation. If the allegations are confirmed, we will be pursuing further disciplinary action, up to and including termination." Mia's eyes widened. "You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling. "I've done nothing wrong." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Mr. Daniels replied, his tone icy. "But if I were you, I'd start preparing for the consequences." The meeting ended with Mia storming out of the office, her bravado finally shattered. As for me, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For months, I'd been dealing with her harassment, wondering if I'd ever find a way to fight back. Now, the tables had turned, and it was Mia who would have to face the fallout. When I left Mr. Daniels's office, my colleagues were waiting in the hallway, their faces filled with curiosity. I didn't say a word I didn't need to. The look on Mia's face as she gathered her things and left the building spoke louder than I ever could. For the first time in months, I felt like I could finally breathe again. But something told me this wasn't the last I'd hear from Mia. Little did I know, her next move would be even more audacious and far more desperate. I didn't expect Mia to give up easily. For months, she'd built her harassment on the belief that she was untouchable, that no one could truly hold her accountable. Even after she was suspended, I had a sinking feeling that she wouldn't quietly accept the consequences. I was right. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, hoping to get a head start on the day without the shadow of Mia's presence. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to relax. But my sense of relief was short-lived. At 9:30 a.m., Mr. Reed called me into his office. His expression was grim, and I immediately knew something was wrong. "Sophie," he said, motioning for me to sit, "we have a situation." "What's going on?" I asked, my pulse quickening. He leaned forward, folding his hands on the desk. "Mia was spotted at your brother's company this morning." I froze. "At Lucas's office?" "Yes," he confirmed. She bypassed the contact person and went straight to the reception desk, requesting a meeting with your brother. She claimed it was urgent. My stomach churned. I could only imagine what she was up to, and none of the scenarios in my mind were good. "Did she meet with him?" I asked, dreading the answer. Mr. Reed nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. Your brother assumed she was there on your behalf, so he agreed to see her." "What happened?" I pressed, my voice tight. He sighed. "According to Lucas, she tried to pitch the same product that was already rejected. She insisted it was the better option and even attempted to convince him to sign a new contract. When he tried to end the meeting, she escalated things." "Escalated?" I echoed. "What do you mean?" Mr. Reed hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "She attempted to use unconventional tactics to persuade him. Let's just say her approach was inappropriate." I clenched my fists, fury rising in my chest. "Unbelievable." "It gets worse," he said, his tone heavy. When Lucas refused to entertain her pitch, she claimed you had sent her there and instructed her to secure the deal at all costs. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's a lie, I exclaimed. I would never. We know, he interrupted, holding up a hand. Lucas didn't believe her for a second. He immediately contacted me, and I've informed Mr. Daniels. Needless to say, this incident has made things even worse for Mia. My mind raced as I tried to process everything. Mia had gone behind everyone's back, marched into Lucas's office, and humiliated herself in a desperate attempt to salvage her career. And now, she was trying to drag my name into the mess. What's going to happen to her? I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of anger and disbelief. Mr. Reed leaned back in his chair. Mr. Daniels has already made his decision. Mia's employment is being terminated effective immediately. We'll also be pursuing legal action for the damages she's caused, including the disruption to the $5 million deal. Hearing those words should have brought me relief, but instead, I felt a deep sense of exhaustion. Mia's actions had pushed me to the brink, and even now, she was trying to pull me down with her. But at least, finally, the company was taking a stand. That afternoon, Mia was summoned to the office to face the consequences. I stayed at my desk, listening as Mr. Daniels and Mr. Reed laid out her offenses in excruciating detail. When the meeting ended, Mia stormed out of the building, her face pale and her eyes brimming with tears. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the months of harassment, the missed opportunities, and the endless stress she had caused me. Mia hadn't just tried to sabotage my career, she'd tried to break me. And now, she was finally facing the fallout. As if losing her job wasn't enough, the company's legal team filed a lawsuit against her for damages. The $5 million deal, while still on the table, required renegotiation with less favorable terms due to the chaos Mia had caused. The cost of those concessions, along with the travel expenses Mia incurred without authorization, were added to the lawsuit. But the consequences didn't stop there. Mr. Daniels informed me that the company had contacted its affiliates within the industry to warn them about Mia's behavior. In an industry as interconnected as ours, her reputation was effectively ruined. Finding another job would be nearly impossible, especially with the lawsuit hanging over her head. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was a hollow sense of finality. Mia had brought this on herself, but it didn't erase the damage she'd done to me. Still, I reminded myself that this was a step toward reclaiming my peace. In the days that followed, the office began to feel normal again. My work progressed smoothly, and my colleagues expressed their relief that Mia was gone. Clients who had been affected by her interference were understanding and appreciative of my efforts to make things right. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Mia's downfall was a harsh reminder of the consequences of unethical behavior. She had been given every opportunity to succeed, but her jealousy and malice had led her down a destructive path. And while I couldn't change what had happened, I knew one thing for certain. I had survived her storm, and I was stronger for it. The dust had finally settled. With Mia's termination and the company's decisive actions, the suffocating tension that had plagued the office for months began to lift. It felt like stepping out into fresh air after being trapped in a dark, musty room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could focus on my work without constantly looking over my shoulder. But what surprised me most was the wave of recognition that followed. I'll admit, I never expected Lucas, my brother, to go out of his way to champion my work so publicly. He was always the shining star in the family. The genius, the trailblazer, the one who could do no wrong. Growing up, I had learned to carve out my own path in his shadow, quietly building my own successes while assuming he barely noticed. But the way he had defended me during the client meeting, it meant more than I could put into words. The day after Mia's suspension, I received a call from Lucas. "Hey, Sophie," he said casually, as if he hadn't just orchestrated a major takedown of my saboteur. "How are you holding up?" "Better now," I admitted. "Thanks to you." He chuckled. "You don't have to thank me. You earned that deal, and you deserved the credit." I just did what any brother would do. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Still, it means a lot." I didn't think you noticed my work. Of course I notice, he said, his tone softening. Sophie, you've always been incredible at what you do. You've got this way of connecting with people, of understanding their needs. It's not something you can teach. Honestly, I'm proud of you. Those words hit me like a tidal wave. Lucas had always been the standard I measured myself against, the unattainable goal I could never quite reach. Hearing him say he was proud of me felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time, I started to see myself the way he did, not as someone constantly trying to catch up, but as someone who had carved her own path and succeeded on her own terms. At work, things began to improve in other ways, too. My colleagues, many of whom had stayed silent during Mia's reign of terror, started reaching out with words of support and encouragement. You handled that whole situation with so much grace, one coworker told me. I don't know how you stayed so professional. I didn't feel graceful, I admitted. But thank you. Even Mr. Daniels, the CEO, made a point of acknowledging my efforts. Sophie, I want you to know how much we value your contributions, he said during a team meeting. Your professionalism and dedication set a standard for everyone in this company. Keep up the great work. Hearing those words from him was validating, but more than that, it felt like a victory, not just over Mia, but over all the doubts and insecurities I had carried with me for years. I had worked hard to get where I was, and for the first time, I felt like I truly belonged. The deal with Lucas's company was still on track, albeit with some renegotiated terms. Despite the challenges Mia had created, the client had expressed their trust in me and their willingness to move forward. When the contract was finalized, Mr. Daniels personally congratulated me. This is a huge win for the company, Sophie, he said. And it's all thanks to your hard work. But it wasn't just about the deal. The experience had changed me in ways I hadn't expected. I felt more confident, more assured in my abilities. For years, I had operated under the shadow of my brother's success, constantly questioning whether I measured up. But now, I realized I didn't need to measure myself against anyone. I had my own strengths, my own victories, and my own story. One moment in particular stood out to me. A longtime client, who had worked with me since my early days at the company, stopped by my desk after hearing about the $5 million deal. You've really come a long way, Sophie, he said with a warm smile. You've always been reliable, but lately, there's something different about you. You seem more confident. It's a good look on you. Thank you, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. That means a lot. That conversation stayed with me. Confidence wasn't something I had ever thought about actively, but I realized he was right. I did feel different, stronger, steadier, and more self-assured. And that newfound confidence started to ripple into other areas of my life. For the first time in years, I started thinking about visiting my family for Thanksgiving. I had avoided going home for so long, afraid of feeling like the underachieving sibling next to Lucas. But now I felt ready. I wanted to share my progress with them, to show them how far I'd come. More than that, I wanted to reconnect. As I sat at my desk, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. The storm was over, and while it hadn't been easy, I had come out stronger on the other side. And for that, I was deeply grateful. The aftermath of Mia's downfall was as swift as it was severe. By the end of the week, her termination was official. The company wasted no time severing ties with her, and the legal team began the process of filing a lawsuit for damages. Her sabotage hadn't just jeopardized the $5 million deal, it had caused countless disruptions, from lost productivity to strained client relationships. The financial repercussions were significant, and the company intended to hold her accountable. Mia's name quickly became a cautionary tale within the industry. Word spread fast, and with our company's extensive network of affiliates, her reputation was effectively ruined. Mr. Daniels, our CEO, made it clear that no affiliated company would ever hire her. We can't take chances on someone so unethical, he told me in passing. She brought this on herself. It was hard not to feel a small sense of satisfaction knowing that justice was being served. But at the same time, I couldn't help but reflect on how things had gotten to this point. Mia had so much potential, yet she had squandered it with jealousy and malice. Watching her downfall was a stark reminder of how destructive unchecked ambition and insecurity could be. For me, life slowly returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after such a chaotic period. With Mia gone, the office atmosphere lightened considerably. I no longer had to second-guess every move I made or spend hours undoing her sabotage. My work flowed smoothly, and my clients, many of whom had been affected by Mia's interference, expressed their gratitude for my professionalism and perseverance. But the real change wasn't just in my work, it was in me. For years, I had carried the weight of self-doubt, constantly comparing myself to my brother Lucas and wondering if I'd ever measure up. But this experience had shown me that I was capable of so much more than I'd given myself credit for. I had faced months of harassment, a high-stakes deal, and the biggest challenge of my career, and I had come out stronger on the other side. One afternoon, Lucas called me, his voice warm and full of pride. "Sophie, I heard the deal went through," he said. "Congratulations. You deserve every bit of this success." "Thanks, Lucas," I replied, smiling. "I couldn't have done it without your support." "Nonsense," he said firmly. "You've always had what it takes. I'm just glad everyone else sees it now." His words stayed with me. For so long, I had seen myself as the underdog, the one struggling to keep up. But Lucas's confidence in me made me realize that I wasn't just keeping up, I was thriving in my own way. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to embrace that. As Thanksgiving approached, I made the decision to visit my family. I hadn't been home in years, partly out of fear of being overshadowed by Lucas, but also because I didn't want to face the disappointment I thought my parents felt toward me. Now, I saw things differently. I wasn't the same insecure girl who had left home after high school. I was Sophie Taylor, a top-performing sales representative who had earned her success through hard work, resilience, and integrity. When I arrived home, my parents greeted me with open arms. The warmth in their smiles and the pride in their eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were proud of me, just as I was. Over dinner, I shared stories of my work, including the recent challenges and triumphs. My father listened intently, nodding with approval, while my mother beamed with pride. "You've grown so much, Sophie," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "We always knew you had it in you." Hearing those words filled me with a deep sense of gratitude. For years, I had been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't stopped to see how far I'd come. Now, sitting at that table surrounded by my family, I finally felt at peace. Lucas, ever the supportive older brother, raised his glass in a toast. "To Sophie," he said with a smile. "The real ace of the Taylor family." I laughed, shaking my head. "I don't know about that, but thank you." In that moment, I realized that my journey wasn't just about overcoming Mia or landing a big deal. It was about finding my own path and learning to believe in myself. The challenges I'd faced had tested me in ways I never could have imagined, but they had also shaped me into the person I was meant to be. As I drove back to the city after Thanksgiving, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was wide open, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to take it. My journey was far from over, but one thing was certain: I was ready for whatever came next.